Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Couper Moorhead, your host of After the Buzzer, where we are talking about the Miami Heat's 114-104 victory over the Toronto Raptors. In this video, we will eventually talk about the paint battle and Miami's comeback, where things were settled on this evening. And then at the end, we'll talk about a player who wasn't in the rotation who had some really nice contributions tonight because they stayed ready on the bench. Before that, a few thoughts on the game. The story of this Raptors 3-game series in 10 days, 2 weeks or so, has been points in the paint. Raptors scored a lot in the paint early on. They were up 41-25 early in the second quarter. Really from there, the Heat just sort of stole the life from Toronto's offense. Their defense kicked into gear. Toronto was shorthanded. They didn't have Scotty Barnes, of course, so give them a little grace and leeway there. But Toronto's offense really kind of ground down as the Heat tightened up in the paint. The Heat took over half their shots at the rim. They got plenty in the paint as well. There were layups and layups and layups. Even when Miami's offense started slow, they were still getting those layups. Again, that means you kind of have a good foundation for how the offense is going to go the rest of the game, as long as you're getting easy shots somewhere. Tyler Hero did what he's been doing, another complete game. He was a plus 30. Bam Adebayo held out the stiff arm late as Toronto had a barrage of late threes. They were trying to get back into the game, playing small ball lineups. Bam just one-on-one scores, self-created situations. Had 4 or 5 scores down the stretch. Just kept Toronto at bay, finished off the win. That's all you ask for. More good Drew Smith minutes. Again, he's been part of the rotation for the past week now. Been a big part of this 4-game winning streak. As Bam said tonight post-game, Drew Smith is making the right play pretty much every time down the floor, winning play after winning play after winning play after winning play. Let's get to the points in the paint. The Toronto Raptors score the 4th most points in the paint in the league. This is what they do. When they came to Miami a couple weeks ago, they scored 62 in the paint. When they beat Miami in Toronto, they scored 68 in the paint. Now, why is this important tonight? Well, early on, in the days leading up to this game, Erik Spoelstra was talking about how they need to tighten up their paint defense, and they really didn't start the way they wanted to. Toronto had 28 points in the paint by the time they got up 16 points, some of those in transition, some of them in the half court, some uncontested layups. When the Heat are giving up those easy scores, they're not really super earned with a ton of ball movement. It's just dumping into a mismatch, a post steal. It's just coming off a curl, getting a layup. Those are signs that the Heat's defense, which prioritizes paint defense, the Heat, above anything else, want to keep the ball out of the paint. They want to push everything away. They will keep extra bodies in the paint, even at the risk of giving up a 3 somewhere, as long as the ball doesn't touch the paint. Well, it wasn't going very well early on. Things not working as intended. As Bam said in postgame, they were playing with fire. And here is what Erik Spoelstra had to say about that early run that Toronto had.
I mean, it was like an extension. It was like we were still in Toronto. I mean, they were downhill. They were in transition. Darko's doing a great job with this young group. They have an identity. Like, there's no confusion of how they're trying to play. And you cannot, try to ease into any possession, because they're going to put pressure on your defense right from the get-go. Off the rebound, they're pushing it, they're attacking, they have speed, quickness, athleticism, they're aggressive, and then everything just seems to be set up for them to go downhill. We dug into doing the tough things, and then as we say often, that tends to change things offensively, and we went on a great run that last 6 minutes offensively. But I think at the beginning of the game, we were trying to do it, see if we could ease into the game and defensively and just, score and put points on the board, and they're not going to let you do that.
But, of course, as Spoelstra said, the Heat turned it around. You don't want to have to do that every game. As Bam referred to, you want to be able to have your defense working, from the nines, from the get-go. It's not going to happen every night. Some nights you're going to have to find that second, third, fourth gear as you're going. He did that tonight. Sometimes you just need what you need to get the win. Here's a stat I like. In the first 2 games a couple weeks ago, Toronto had 38 and 35 paint touches. And those touches are tracked by the cameras up in the ceiling of the arena, the tracking data that we get. And they can track literally when the ball touches the paint. So they were in the mid-30s, high 30s in the first two games. Tonight, Toronto had just 26 paint touches. So even though Toronto was getting points in the paint on the board, they had fewer opportunities to score down there, fewer touches. The ball was entering the paint with a quick pass, less often, especially as the game went on, as Miami came back from that 16-point deficit. So even though Toronto had 56 points in the paint by the end, remember they had 28 of those in the first 16 minutes, and then the next 28 of those came over the following 32 minutes. So after that big Toronto start, Miami cut their points in the paint rate effectively in half. So 56 points in the paint sometimes feels high for the Heat, but with how they started tonight, that's a pretty good number. Another big part of that was R.J. Barrett, who had 37 when the Raptors beat Miami up in Toronto. Well, tonight, R.J. Barrett had 13 points on 5 of 18 shooting. He did have a triple-double. He had 10 assists, 11 rebounds, but 5 of 18 shooting when you don't have Scotty Barnes, when your team isn't shooting that well from the three, that's a number that's really going to make it difficult to win. Another number I like, in the 2 Toronto games previously, R.J. Barrett produced 1.10 points per drive. Pretty good numbers, right? Maybe not elite, but upper echelon stuff, okay? Tonight, R.J. Barrett's drives, he had 12 of them. They produced 0.64 points per drive. That, over the course of a full season would be right at the bottom of the league. So Barrett's numbers really weren't good enough. The Heat were crowding him. They were, swiping at the ball when he drove. They were contesting him at the rim with good verticality. They were throwing bodies at him. He still got his drives, and he missed a couple shots that he might normally make on another night. But the Heat made it tough when he was the guy who had to be the engine of Toronto's offense. And as we've talked about so many times already, when there's that one guy who the other team needs to get going, the Heat are going to find ways to try and stop him, to try and get him out of his comfort zone. Job well done tonight. Now, Nikola Jovic. We have no way of proving this because it's not a real stat, but we have no way of proving that the Heat lead the league in dudes that stay ready. Just something we made up, but it feels like they lead the league in dudes that stay ready, doesn't it? Because every year, it feels there's the same story playing out so many times. A guy will be out of the rotation. He'll be on the bench. His minutes will be down. His minutes will be inconsistent or completely gone. And then Eric Spoelstra taps him on the shoulder, and then all of a sudden they're coming in, making a big impact. They're turning a game. They're, a big part of a big run, or all of a sudden they're in the rotation for the next few weeks. It's happened this season already with Alec Burks. It's happened with Haywood Highsmith. It's happened with Drew Smith lately. Tonight it was Jovic's turn. Interestingly, Jovic played a lot of his minutes during that big run in the second quarter. He was playing at center, which 2 years ago during his rookie year, he played a lot of minutes at center as well. So, there's only so much you can say about this thing because it's so ingrained in what the Heat, preach to their guys. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And then as Eric Spoelstra will put it, make me watch you, make me play you, make it so once I'm playing you, I don't want to have to take you out because you're playing so well. I don't want to play anybody over you. This is what we've heard from Spoelstra years and years and years and years. This is well over a decade of, that sort of thing coming from Spo. That's what he instills on his bench guys. You have to stay ready. Udonis Haslem, of course, was the king of that. So credit to Jovic. He began this season as a starter in training camp and preseason. It was clear they were going to try and make it work with him as a fifth starter, alongside when Terry Rozier was in the starting lineup. Then the starting lineup starts to change. Jovic, loses some minutes. He's coming off the bench. Last week or so, he's been almost out of the rotation entirely because when the team is winning, when there's success in other areas, some guys somewhere have to lose some minutes, lose some opportunities. Well, tonight things weren't going very well with the group that had been playing well, and Jovic had his turn. Came in, hit a couple threes when he was open, had a couple hard drives to the rim, got himself to the free throw line, had another couple drives later on. He had 14 points on 5 shots, 4 of 5 shooting, and most important, He was a plus 25 on the night. You don't want to give all the credit to one guy. A plus 25 is more of a team number than an individual number, but there's no denying that when Jovic was on the floor tonight, good things were happening, in part because he was doing them, and in part because his spacing on the floor and his playmaking, especially when he was a center, that 5-out spacing, good things were happening because he was on the floor. So a good night for Jovic, a good night for the Heat, sort of recovering and getting back to who they are after that slow start in the first quarter or so. 4 wins in a row. Everybody's happy with that. And now there's another couple days off, and we'll see you next time right here on After the Buzzer. Thanks for joining us. Take care.